So my mission is to always let students know, like, you belong in higher ed. Yes, you do. Learn to tell your story, learn to own it, learn to not feel shame. Because I think a lot of the times it's hard to voice your story because there's shame involved. And so I work with students on that as well. But my mission, my goal, my purpose is to help students feel, and people, not just students, people feel like you can do whatever you need to do.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Campfire Circle. I'm your host, Tanya Bhattacharya, and I empower purpose-driven women in building influential personal brands that drive change and raise revenue. We all talk about getting a seat at the table, but why though? Who wants to sit in a stuffy boardroom anyway? Let's reimagine the ultimate space of leadership as a campfire circle, where we share stories that inspire movements, build brave communities to huddle together with for warmth, and where there is always room. Come sit with us.
I am so excited to speak to Jessica de Anda, who is the daughter of immigrant parents and raised to be a proud Ecuadorian, Mexican, and an American. However, as a low-income first-gen college student, she struggled to find culturally affirming staff in higher education. As the only Latina in a microbiology department dominated by white men, she struggled to find empathetic staff that could meet her needs. This experience inspired Jessica to dedicate her career to uplifting students by sharing her lived experiences and helping students harness their culture and their identities to pursue their aspirations. I love this. So Jessica has worked in the nonprofit sector, building a pipeline of underrepresented students to higher education. She's worked as a career advisor and now works as the program manager for the evening and weekend MBA office at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. Welcome to the Campfire Circle podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be with you in this call today.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I can't wait to hear more because this bio has really piqued my interest. I'm so curious and intrigued by your story. So can you tell us even more about your journey and how you got here?
Yeah, where to begin? Let's start with the day I was born. The day I was born, I was actually born Jessica de Anda. And I like to share this story because I think it illustrates a lot of the experiences that I had to navigate as I was growing up. So legally, my name was changed to Jessica de Anda, right? Which is how I introduced myself. That's how I know myself. Until I was 18, I looked at my birth certificate, had 2 pages, and I was like, what? My birth name is Jessica? So long story short, my brother, his name is Edgardo Ponce, and he struggled so much in just education, like in his school. Teachers refused to really say his name. They would avoid calling him. Students would make fun of him for that name. And so he just had a really hard time, and he was able to articulate that experience to my parents. And when I was 1 month old, they changed my name to Jessica. And I like to share the story because I think it's very pertinent to the conversation of how much we've had to assimilate to this country to just live and be recognized. And it's incredibly painful. But the day I was born, it started. I didn't choose for that to happen. But it's so little by little, I've had to navigate that kind of assimilationist agenda. And even as a kid, Spanish is my native tongue, and you can't hear it because, again, I've assimilated to make sure that I don't get that negative, really horrible, I was ignored a lot as a child because I didn't speak English. And it was really difficult to navigate also with my accent. And so it took me a long time. And I'm not proud of the fact that I've had to assimilate. But these are the experiences that really drove my passion and understanding of the student experience and how difficult it could be to navigate just being yourself when it's not accepted. It's like, nope, what are you doing? We can't understand you, right? Enunciate. I also had an interesting experience, and I'll just share a little bit because I don't want to get too deep into it. But my mother's from Mexico, from Zacatecas. My father's from Quito, Ecuador. I grew up in a very racially, ethnically segregated environment in Southern California. There was the Mexican side, because yes, we were Latinx, but most of us were Mexican. There was a Mexican side, there was a Black side, and there was a white side, meaning our schools were very segregated. I went to school with a predominantly Latinx community, a couple of Black students, but not really. There was a Black school and there was a white school. And so navigating those experiences, it's also this concept that we Latinx folks are not a monolithic group. And it was difficult to navigate that as well as a Mexican, Ecuadorian, and an American. It was like, so it's always, there's this constant, like, what are you that I get from people when I enter the space? Because I think I'm racially, ethnically ambiguous. And people are always like looking at me funny. And for a long time, I did assimilate. So it's just that really informs the way I approach students, and really help them understand their strengths and their identities. Because I know that feeling, that pain.
100%. And there's this aspect of belonging that comes up in that story. I can relate to your story. English is not my mother tongue, but I've actually since lost my mother tongue, which is Bengali, as a result of assimilating. And that's not something I'm proud of either. But, I think sharing these stories creates that kind of not just safe space, but brave space to be able to share these experiences. And I love that when I ask you to share your story, you share your story. It's not a rehearsed elevator pitch. It's not any of that. And so I'm just curious, like, was that something you've had to work on? Like, now you can share your story with a lot of courage and vulnerability and authenticity. Have you always been able to do that? Or tell me about that.
No, I would say growing up, also this experience of being a woman in a Latinx household, where machismo is really like, women shut up and listen. But my father has always been very, very explicit with saying, the expectations, you're going to college. Mind you, both my parents didn't go to college. That was what I had to do. I knew that was the way out of poverty, because I grew up in extreme poverty. And I had no choice. My father, that was the expectation, right? Even though I was a woman, even though those expectations were still, it's like the funniest thing in the world, because this expectation was still that I was supposed to get married and have children, which I have none of those. But I have my degrees. I have my degree babies. Experiencing all of that really does, have this idea, this notion that I'm not supposed to be able to tell my story because a man will be able to tell it for me. And explicitly white people tell my story all the time, in books, in literature. And, when I went to college, I was like, what? That's not my story. I need to tell my own story. And one of the most powerful things about being Latinx is that we share our stories through oral history. So I've spent my entire life listening, participating in storytelling, just exchanging like chisme, right? Gossip. And it's been really fun to just experience it in a very lighthearted way. And I think people are too much in their heads thinking, I'm not a storyteller. Yes, you are. You tell stories all the time. And just practicing that, I think it helps to really just speak. And I do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of teaching. So I think that also helps, just getting used to hearing your own voice.
That's amazing. I think stories are generative, and you're right. Everybody's a storyteller. If you really notice, we are telling stories from when we wake up to when we go to bed, whether they're to ourselves, to our partners, to our friends, to the students you work with, all of that. And so I'm curious, as you tell your story and share your lived experience with the students you work with, maybe with the faculty you work with, how have you seen that impact their lives? Like, what starts to shift for them?
I interviewed a lot of Latinx Haas alum. They came in and they give me their perspectives, and I gave that advice back to the students. That's a part A. I'm going to do a part B to this workshop, but part A was that. And a lot of the students were like, I didn't even know that there were so many Latinx people that had their MBAs. Like, where's this list? Like, how do I get access to it? I was like, it can be hard navigating the space, not seeing someone that looks like you, right? So I clarify and I bring up different people's stories and I uplift their stories, because it's sometimes it's just exposure and they don't get to see it as often. So I think that also, from the feedback I've gotten, has been really helpful. Just, I'm not alone. becomes such a powerful, beautiful thing that I keep hearing from other people after my workshops and me interacting with them. I love it. I love that because I don't ever want people to feel alone.
You spoke to something so powerful there, not just feeling of belonging, but that ability to see. Like there's this phrase that I love, which is you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And, it's not totally a true phrase because I think so many of us have gotten to where we are without having necessarily a lot of role models who do look like us. But I agree with the sentiment behind it. And so I guess one of my questions for you is like, who are your role models and mentors?
Yes, who are my role models and mentors? This is a great question. So I oftentimes, when I enter a space and I look at the landscape, I say, okay, where are these communities? How do I connect with the communities that are already doing the work that I'm interested in, which is really trying to create that sense of belonging, right? In whatever space I'm entering, right? Typically it's with people of color. And so when I entered the space, like when I entered Berkeley, I was like, I know that there's some really cool organizations that are doing the work that I want to be part of. So that's what I started doing. I started connecting with those individuals that are in those leadership roles. So that's how I kind of came into the roles I'm in now. So I'm the chair of diversity and advocacy for Alianza, Latinx Chicanx staff organization. I'm part of the Dean Staff Advisory Committee because they're already doing the work that I'm interested in doing, which is uplifting people. And in terms of my mentors, it's those people that had the roles before me. So like the chair of diversity and advocacy for Alianza, that particular person is now my mentor, the previous person that had the role. I have also mentors that I just admire, right? So when I looked at the Berkeley, I'm focusing in on Berkeley for now. The Berkeley lens was, okay, look, I really admire this person. So one of my mentors is the chief of staff for the executive vice provost. And I approached her because she started the Cal Women's Network. So it specifically uplifts women. She's doing amazing work. And she's my mentor now. And so it's just really finding people that speak to you and not being afraid to ask. Like, hey, can we get coffee or can we connect over Zoom? I love their leadership style, whatever it is that you admire about them, just approach them. And that's how I've grown to really appreciate and love all of my mentors because I went into it knowing that that's what I wanted. I wanted them as my mentor.
I think sometimes we can find mentorship in funny places. And I remember you sharing a story, I think it was on your social media, about how one of your first, and I may get this wrong, but one of your first mentors was actually was a pet rooster. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that's
true. I want to hear the story.
Yes. So when I was little, I had a rooster. He was white, beautiful rooster. And his name was Pancho. Funny because I lived in the city. So I didn't have this pet for too long because the city ordinances were like, no, you cannot have that. But when I did have him, he was just really wonderful. But so roosters have this very protective nature. So he would always chase my dog, the family dog, right? And he was very aggressive, just trying to protect his babies, right? His family. And he would also he was very dependable. So he would always wake us up at 5:00 in the morning. And I was like, I hate you. But yes, you're correct in terms of finding mentors in different places. So like he taught me to always be there for my community, to always use my voice, to even every day, right? Every day I need to use it and to really advocate for my community. Really, yeah, he's I guess he's one of my mentors. Like I miss him so much, but yes, that is my Pancho.
Well, I love that. And I got to tell you, when I read you share that, I felt like it gave legitimacy because I think of Gary, my dog, as one of my mentors because he's like not even 15 pounds. He's like a tiny little thing. And he uses his voice. Like he will bark at anyone, anything. He's not afraid. He's very protective. I want to be like that too.
Exactly.
So, Jessica, I hear you sharing all of the things that you're involved in, from your work at the Haas School of Business to nonprofit board roles, to consulting, to teaching Chicanx studies, to workshops, public speaking, and I'm sure that list could go on and on. And so I found that as our visibility grows, as our brand grows, as we are out in the world, we start to get a lot more requests for our time. And we have to start deciding, like, what do we want to say yes to? What do we want to say no to? What roles do we want to take on? And so what informs those decisions for you?
Yeah. So how I decide what to say yes and what to say no to is, like we previously talked about, the mentors that I have. One of the mentors I have that I really appreciate is my executive coach. And I found her through this staff leadership development program that I'm part of. And it's been really great to just bounce ideas off of her to really help her clarify what I'm stuck on, right? What am I stuck on that I'm not able to understand my values? Everything has to be in line with my values and my goals. And if it's outside of that, I've had to let things go. So I was part of, I was actually leading 2 staff organizations, 2 employee resource groups. And my coach was like, is that what's happening? And I was able to really, take things off my plate and to put things on that actually aligned with what I wanted to do. So every decision I make is in line with my values, is in line with my goals. But again, it's not just in my head. I always seek advice. And again, like I mentioned earlier, with my mentors, I specifically sought them out because I knew that they were great at what it is that they're great at, right? Is it negotiation? Is it networking? What are they great at? And then I use that. I go to them and I'm like, hey, I'm having this issue. Should I go with A or B? I need your advice. And it's been helpful to have those people I can depend on.
Hey, if anything you're hearing today inspires you to get more visible as a go-to trusted voice for your audience and drive change towards your deeper mission, I've got something for you. LinkedIn is my favorite place to share my stories and build relationships with my co-conspirators and brand new friends. So I put together a free resource with 14 prompts to create your next post on LinkedIn. Take all the guesswork out of what to say and just start building your impact and influence. Be sure to tag me in your post so I can come by, cheer you on, and amplify your message. You can find those free prompts in the show notes. Okay, back to the episode.
You spoke to something that I think is such a helpful tip, not just the mentorship, because I think that's definitely yes, and having an executive coach, but really getting clear on your values. Like, what is your mission? What is your vision? And does this new opportunity align with that or not? I think that helps us. It really helps serve as a North Star for us, So that's great. That's great. Something you said earlier, which I 100% believe in, is as women of color, we're oftentimes navigating work, volunteership, and just life with our needing to wear a professional mask to be safe in some spaces. But do you have any advice on how to foster belonging, whether we're the department head or the newest hire, wherever we are at in the chain of command? Like, how can we foster belonging?
One of the tool sets, and this is why I also work in higher ed, one of the secrets of higher ed is that you can really engage with the faculty. You can take the classes. You can really learn from world-renowned folks in the areas that they're experts at. And so I took an executive education course in negotiation. Holly Schroff is just amazing. But one of the things that she mentions is this concept of shadow negotiation. So it's really about getting to develop meaningful relationships with people on an individual basis, little by little. So those relationships can help you in doing whatever you need to do. In terms of fostering belonging, so with the course in negotiation, you learn about shadow negotiation, which just is a fancy way of saying one-on-ones. Have one-on-ones with people, approach people and build that relationship with people, build that trust with people so that you can later on really feel connected to the community. And it can be scary. And I will say, can feel unsafe when you're like, oh, shoot, I'm in an all white space. And it oftentimes happens as a person of color. Like, the higher you go in your career, the more rooms you're talking to executives. You're going to be the only one. That's happened to me. So I'm like, have a meeting with the chancellor in like 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh. And so it's really important that, yes, you are going to be in the spaces that probably going to be the only one. So how do you navigate that? You build those relationships as you go so that you don't feel so alone. So you don't feel as though you're not part of the community, because you are going to be part of the community. And I engage that way as well, because I don't necessarily so I do teach, I do workshops. That's amazing. But when it comes to like a big group of people, I prefer to have relationships with them in the back end, like one-on-ones, instead of just like, hey, group of people, I'm not teaching, but I'm going to tell you a story. So it can be a little intimidating. So that's how I approach it. So just one-on-ones. So eventually I can feel more connected to the community I'm in.
Great strategy. And I what's coming up for me when you say that is when I speak to groups, I realize the groups that have a really great outcome, I tend to know everybody in that group individually. We have an individual relationship. And so I think that's really important because then it speaks to this concept of emergence as well, where like complex interactions arise out of simple one-on-one interactions. That's such a great tip. And I like this term shadow negotiation.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important too, because oftentimes when we enter, it could be any negotiation. You're talking to a partner and you're like, what are we going to watch? Okay, well.
Yeah, exactly.
And in negotiation, I also like to call that in, because with that particular strategy, it's not win-lose. It's really asking questions. So that's how I approach a relationship. I ask questions. I don't say, I need you to do X, Y, Z. That's not how you build a relationship, right? You really ask questions. You really try to get to the nitty gritty, and then you come out with the outcome that you both can agree on. And that I really like that, because ultimately you both want to work really well together. You both want to, in any relationship, right? You both want to be able to be comfortable around each other. So knowing that that's the outcome, and you enter it that way, you enter with curiosity instead of so much like, yes, it's important to know your story. But when you're building relationships with people, it's more important to get to know their story so that they feel heard. So that's how I approach. That's why I love one-on-ones more so than a huge group of people. It can be like, it can be a little overwhelming.
This kind of answers this question a little bit, but I wanted to ask you how you became such a confident public speaker. So now I know a piece of that is through building one-on-one strong relationships with many of the individuals that are in the audience, right? But anything else you want to share around that?
Yeah, so in terms of public speaking, it's been a lot of practice. I'm not going to tell you my age, but it's been a lot of just always volunteering to be the speaker if let's say I'm in a class for a student perspective, right? If I'm in a class, I'm going to be the one doing a lot of the speaking portions of the project if we're working on a project together. If it's, really taking on any opportunity, whatever it is I'm learning, to go and teach it. So really transmitting my knowledge to other people, having that perspective has helped me really own my voice and be able to be a confident public speaker, because I teach, right? It's part of teaching. You have to learn to engage. You have to learn to enunciate. You have to learn to really engage with the community and be heard. And it's a lot of fun, but that's how I've approached it. And I've learned through always like, I'll do it. If I learn something, I'll teach it. I have a lot of workshops in my head right now that I need to develop into actual content, actual workshops, but I'm excited for that opportunity. And again, any place to do that is where I welcome people to just try and experiment. If you have an employee resource group, volunteer to do a workshop on whatever you feel that one of your skills is strong in. So like, let's say you just learned about investing. Don't be shy to do an investment workshop with your community, because they will know what you're talking about. That's your community. And so, yeah, I just encourage everybody to just try, just experiment. You will fail, but that's how you learn.
Yes, never a failure, always a lesson, for sure.
Exactly.
There's so much I want to say there. I don't even know where to begin. Well, I just love that. And I think it's important to know that we don't have to have all the answers. It doesn't have to be fully fleshed out. Like, it's okay to work in drafts. We can show up with what we've got, and every single experience is a learning lesson. And that's a beautiful thing. And I hear you on the half-baked workshop ideas. I joke that I have just a wheelbarrow of half-baked ideas that I'm just carrying around with me all the time. My friend calls it cookie dough. It's a half-baked cookie dough that I just have.
I like that. I like that reframing. Yeah.
Yes, because we all love cookie dough. That's not a bad thing. So as we wrap it up, one of my kind of final questions is, and I ask this of everyone, what is your big vision for our world's future? Right? Like earlier, we talked about how important it is to have a vision and a mission so that we can make sure that we are aligning with the opportunities that come to us. So what do you hope as a result of your efforts the world will look like a lifetime from now?
Yeah. So my lens has always been education. That's how I found my path out of poverty, right? So education is your way out of poverty. And I keep hearing other people of color use this phrase, like, I refuse to ever go back. And I'm like, oh, it pains me, but I hear it, right? It's the very real reality of growing up in poverty. And one of the most powerful things that I just wish I had is someone in higher education that knows how it feels to just struggle, right? Like the assumption can't be that I have a computer all the time. Like the assumption can't be that I have internet access. The assumption can't be that I am able to make it to class because my car didn't break down. Like really having that. I made it a point to be here for students and to be very vocal about my experiences because I know how painful it could be if you feel alone. So my mission is to always let students know, like, you belong in higher ed. Yes, you do. Learn to tell your story, learn to own it, learn to not feel shame. Because I think a lot of the times it's hard to voice your story because there's shame involved. And so I work with students on that as well. But my mission, my goal, my purpose is to help students feel, and people, not just students, people feel like you can do whatever you need to do. You can go for whatever it is that you're interested in doing. Like you were mentioning earlier, it's not so much you can't be what you can't see, because you can be what you can't see, right? And so I really am so into transmitting my knowledge because I want to uplift, I want to empower students of color in particular, because I know how hard it is to navigate the space and navigate higher education. And I don't want it to be so complicated. I want to provide clarity and just be an example of, what you can do if you just try, right? What you can do if you seek out resources that you weren't given the day you were born. In really painful situations to just be heard. And I'm here, right? I'm here to tell people you belong here. And I'm here. Come to Berkeley. But, please find spaces where you feel that connection as well.
I love what you said about not having to feel shame around your story, because really it's about resilience, about courage. Mm-hmm. It's about breaking the generational cycles. It's about doing things differently. I love that. Thank you for what you do. So I want to wrap it up by asking, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
And that's a great question. So for now, before I reveal my other business initiatives, you could connect with me on LinkedIn. Love connecting with you people on LinkedIn. And we could, start a conversation, be part of the community there. I think it's LinkedIn I think it's a really powerful tool to connect with the people that we most admire, because mid-level to higher executives are on LinkedIn. And oftentimes we're like, oh, I can't be on LinkedIn. I can't interact with these people. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had, how much opportunity I've been able to develop on LinkedIn because I'm not afraid to ask. I've done workshops, I've done consulting with different companies because people talk to me on LinkedIn. So please don't feel like you cannot be part of the conversation.
100%. Ditto. That's how you and I actually met, is on LinkedIn. And I completely agree with you. I think LinkedIn is such an empowering tool to be able to reach out to folks. And I've really never had someone that was upset that I reached out to them, or even somebody that didn't even respond. People respond. They're excited to talk to you. They're excited to mentor you. They're excited to connect you to whoever you need to talk to. So that is great advice. I encourage everyone to follow Jessica. She posts really inspirational content, really, really fabulous stuff, amazing stories. So, and we'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes as well so that people can connect with you.
Perfect. Yay. Yeah. Please feel free to interact with me, comment on my post, really just engage with the community on LinkedIn, right? You're a part of the LinkedIn community and we want to hear your voice.
Yes. 1,000%. You belong there. You belong on LinkedIn. Get on there, start connecting, and make it happen. So thank you so much for this conversation. I really love what you're doing in the world. Keep it up. You're making shifts happen every day. I see it, I hear it, and I love it. I love to see it. So
Perfect.
thanks for being you. Absolutely.
What'd you think? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, reach out and let me know through lumosmarketing.co. Yes, that's Lumos, as in the illumination spell from Harry Potter. Because when you shine, magical things happen. You can get social with me on LinkedIn, and of course, check out the show notes to stay in touch with our guests. Let's talk soon.